So, Dr. Rashmi, can we hand it over to you, and we'll start the recording after you start, Dr. Rashmi.
Okay, I think here. Hello.
So,
Can
yeah. So
I'm
I'll
audible
just
to everyone?
yes, please.
Yeah, you're audible.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. Unfortunately, good evening, everyone. Unfortunately, the technology is not supporting me today. There is some problem. I tried in my phone. I tried in my laptop also. It is not. The video is not coming. Yeah. So I think from here, I think we will start our all panelists are here. The first, I would like to thank Dr. Charan Singh and EGROW Foundation to organize this the webinar series and giving us an opportunity to share the educational perspective, especially from the backdrop of National Education Policy 2020. So there is in fact, education is actually one of the primary and core development concern of any economy, any nation. So, because if for India, it is actually going to be another major sector that within 10 years time, that by 2030, India is aspired to be a US dollar 10 trillion economy and with a population of 1.5 billion. That time, education is going to be, education has made role, because by then every second person in India would be associated with the education sector, either as a student or as a worker. When early childhood care and education became part of the education system, it is almost 50% of Indian population will be in the preschool or school or university or technical education classrooms. And on the other side, what we can see that around 8 to 9% of the workforce is also going to be associated with the education sector. That is something around 65 to 85 million workers will be, linked to some or other aspects of the education, either as a directly or indirectly. So with this backdrop, we can see that we have to look into the national education policy, that how this national education policy is going to address this big, maybe gigantic challenge. So because any policy has to provide a detailed roadmap to direct different segments and different goals to achieve the ultimate development of the population. So, the third, now we are into the third national education policy in 70 years. The NEP 2020 is in place after 30 years of the second policy. Let us keep aside the major gaps that the present policy has while we review it from the backdrop of its size of the population or education sector it is dealing and its requirements, the areas to be catered to address the national development challenges. Let's now focus on the major change that the policy proposes, which would change the aspirations of the millions of the young population in India and their families in the new policy regime. There, I want to focus on one thing, that the paradigm shift which is envisaging, that NEP 2020 has completed the paradigm shift which has been initiated in the second national education policy in 1986, that the shift towards privatization of all levels of education sector. The all levels education sector. Now, what we can see that every aspects of the education, like including the public institutions, also expected to be, privatized some or other way. That is what this policy is envisaging. For me, it is actually a major challenge as well as an opportunity. So it is a challenge because how we will meet the inclusiveness and equity concerns of the nation with almost 750 million young population in 2030. The reduced role of state in school education would be a greater hit to the educational aspiration of millions of low-income and middle-income households. The various aspects of child development, as well above all, national development, including the national security, might be at risk when the state is envisaging to have more private players in the education sector. This is a major concern. The other challenge is how the sector that is dominated by private players can support the national development goals, which often do not even offer decent rate of return on their investment. And third is a policy document also thrust on philanthropy and the market-based finance for both students as educational loans and for institutions as infrastructure loan. So the question is whether a credit-driven development promotes culture and social development, which is an integral part of any civilization at any point of time. This is a kind of these are the key challenges which I find this policy is throwing when we look into the future. But on the other side, there are some possibilities also. The paradigm shift that is this policy is opening in front of us, explaining. It is unlikely that the state can meet the diversified needs and as highly educated and economically segregated, highly economically and educationally segregated population. The educational demand of a second and third generation graduate and child are different from that of the first generation literate parent and child. So as the middle and upper class population prefers courses and institutions that cater their educational requirements, aspirations, and the comforts. In a market-driven economy, if such choices dominate the educational preferences, how long state can prevent private players? Therefore, we must accept that the present socio-economic and political framework demands such changes, even though it leaves multifold challenges to many. Our question, actually, this panel, would be whether the NEP has the potential to manage these diverse requirements and aspirations, or how it can be used to meet these aspirations realistically. There are some other reasons also that, considering the growth potential of the education sector and the probable interest of the many across the globe to pitch in Indian education sector in coming days, in the coming days is another possibility as well as challenge, that because India may be one of the few countries in the world has a benefit of demographic shift, that a nation with young and growing population, unlike many other countries where population is aging and either stagnating or declining. So in fact, the situation in India with regard to the education development should be an area of promises and prosperity for people and the state. So the question whether the NEP 2020 has the capacity to utilize this scenario effectively for the benefit of nation's interest and its people's needs. So this panel, we are expecting that we will be able to throw some thoughts on the broad questions from different segments, and we have a very esteemed panel who has long years of experience in dealing, as well as also they can look forward and foresee things and throw some debates, deliberations on this possibility of NEP 2020. So with that, I request first Professor Rakesh Bhattabayal to speak, and he agreed to speak on higher education. Dr. Rakesh Bhattabayal teaches us Center for Media Studies in JNU, and he has authored two interesting historical work on two educational institutions, JNU on higher education and Modern School in Delhi on school education. I request Rakesh Bhattabayal to take it over from here. Thank you.
Sir, please unmute yourself.
I know. Mr. saying good evening, Rashmi Bhaskaran, Dr. Bhaskaran, and all of you present, esteemed colleagues present here. In fact, I've spoken and written on this new education policy 4 years from last 4 5 years since the draft first came, and then the draft was changed, and the new draft came, and then the new policy had come. And I initially saw it differently, and then gradually, as we also witness how university education has been treated over the last 4 5 years, and therefore a new kind of understanding of the policy regime emerges. Let that may as it stands. I thought that after reading the higher education segment of this policy in tandem with the larger policy regime first, secondly, larger socio-economic conditions, and third, the larger political regime where or which is supposed to implement the policy. All these things, when read together, provide certain clues to the questions that Rashmi had raised this afternoon about the feasibility of a new policy regime able to respond to the challenges that the next couple of decades, maybe maximum couple of decades. I'm taking to 2020 is what some people thought in 1986 would be the end kind of limit where the policy was addressing itself. But the world has changed drastically, and pandemic has given us a new warning sign of a change that would come. Given all these, I thought let me limit my discussion to 2 or 3 very urgent issues that emerges from the policy, reading the policy. I'm not talking about the policy itself, but the reading the policy and the kind of reading the larger society. One, some of the problem areas that the policy identifies as the problem areas, and I quote 3 or 4. One is that the higher education segment is severely fragmented. The second is it's a rigid separation of disciplines. And third is limited teacher and institutional autonomy. Fourth is merit-based career management is a problem. Fifth is lesser emphasis on research at most universities and colleges. These 4 or 5 items I found were listed as part of the problem. Now, the key changes that were supposed to address those changes are obviously, I will address 3. One is the moving towards faculty and institutional autonomy. So there's no autonomy, and the new policy would give more autonomy. Second is reaffirming faculty and institution leadership. So unlike till yesterday, the leadership was not there, or they're curtailed by limitations. That leadership will be provided through merit-based approach. And the third is National Research Foundation to fund outstanding peer-reviewed research, because that will address the quality of research that is not happening. So the National Research Fund. Now, I'm taking these 3-4 as major issues that I thought the policy was addressing. Now, does it do that? How do we analyze the policy document? Now, the question that the country looks at when in policy parameter takes into consideration, as Rashmi was also pointing out, the demographic dividend that we're talking about, everybody was talking about till yesterday. And now, as Santosh Mehrotra was personally telling me, and his book recently and articles are indicating that we are getting into it in a tough domain, in a rough domain, in a crisis domain. Because by 2030, 2040, in fact, we are very fast in actually ending into what is called the middle income country trap, where we will be trapped unless something drastic happens. Now that drastic is not seen here. Also, this drastic is not seen here in the sense that the kind of problems 2007 onwards we are facing is not a problem that we have created, but it's a global capitalism. The crisis of capitalism has created a kind of problem that the national development paradigm is not able to address. So either we moved on to what is called manufacturing India or made in India or something India and that, but does it solve? Because you see that the largest economy, one of the largest economy, America, is now trying to move out of its America first into dialogue with other worlds. So in that sense, does this new paradigm of policy, education policy, address that? Because National Development Agenda was fixed in 1966, Kothari Commission. If you see, the motto was that the education will lead to national development. Therefore, national institutions, CSIR labs, and this lab and that lab, all will gear up to national development. Now, are we talking about national development in the sense that 1960s we were talking, and therefore the institution will try to address it themselves to that kind of national development paradigm? Today, the world is different. Today, the nation is different. And today, the national development goals are different. So in that sense, the policy is somewhere kind of confused. It doesn't say, give you any signal about as to what. Skill development for what? A higher education institution for what? And therefore, from that confusion, I derive the point that there is some issues at the political level, at the socio-cultural level, about what is the developmental goal that this society has. One, and that is getting reflected into the kind of jobs that higher education institution is given. Research, teaching, research, and innovation. So these are the three things that they were all talking about. But the nature of all those is somewhere I have a sense when reading the higher education in comparison to the entire document, I feel a bit of confused state. Now, the second, if you have a developmental goal in concurrent with the larger understanding of the larger economy, larger global economy where you are placed, you realize that the challenge is enormous, because a new generation, like for example in 60s, a new generation came to, which is called the first generation learners. They came to the education segment, and that created a kind of pressure on higher education institution that also got in the tension, got added to the tension of anti-Hindi, anti-English, anti-other local language issues. And therefore, 1965 to 1970, you could see large number of old universities got completely destroyed by the pressure of the local population which was coming. A lot of colleges, first-rate colleges, got completely submerged with the local demand. That, munde nu naukri dena hai. So in that sense, the guys get job. And the entire problem in JNU today is that the northern Indian state, primarily UP and Bihar, the guys need job, and through politics, they could get a job in JNU, Delhi University, and all these things. So job is a push, not in what university stands for. So therefore, the first generation learners, and don't forget the 2009 fundamental right to education has brought, and many state initiatives have brought a lot of people into education. Bihar, UP, Odisha, large number of people have come into education, and that segment will come to a higher education segment and demand, either through aspiration or through natural course of time, they'll demand entry into institutions, and we need large number of institutions, and also institutions at different corners of the country. In that, again, the policy documents is slightly confused. Not slightly, it's confused, and not just confused, it also adds to a problem, because the nature of the policy document is a very centralization driven document, whereas the solution for the large problem of large issue of large population coming and demanding higher education is actually to be solved by the states, by the local communities, the local institutions, the local governance. In this sense, I think the country will see a major problem today when all the policies, and particularly this education policy, gives you a signal of centralizing tendencies, where the solution to the demand of higher education or even other education is they lie at the local level, at the state level, at the provincial level. And therefore, federal structure would have helped this education policy much more. You don't forget, in the post-partition India, it is the state which solved the issue of rehabilitation and education. For example, Delhi solved a large number of problems. For example, Punjab. I was going through the Punjab, the way educational resettlement happened. There was this education director, the DPI, GC Chatterjee. He brought in a large number of innovative structures to solve the refugee children's problem of education. Similarly, in Delhi, the local government solved the problem. Not just the center helped, but the local state. Bengal, Bombay, for example, solved a large number of problems for the local population, the refugee population which had come. For example, Punjab University was given place in Shimla first, which was part of Punjab. The Punjab University chapter was opened there. And now, in this sense, if huge population is coming to study in higher educational institution, the states were the prime actors, and they were completely missing in the policy documents. Not even mentioning, but the federal structure is missing, and that therefore gives us out of the policy document a new problem, because the country's economy, unlike the economy before 2012, 13, 14, is now under GST domain, and there is no planning commission, no other maybe say Gadgil committee report or any other report. So it is the GST commission, interstate commission, and the economy is driven by a large national economy where the center had almost given a kind of role which is disbursing the finances to state, where state actually has no other sources of revenue left to them in the manner that they had earlier. Therefore, while the document is centralizing, economy also has become slightly more centralized than it was before. In that sense, the states were not given a role, and center taking more role in the resource base, whereas the problem that we identify and in actual terms lies with the state, and that will create a major problem for education scenario in the years to come. For example, you don't have to go day after tomorrow or day before tomorrow or day before yesterday. In fact, many of the universities, for example, Patiala University, Punjabi University Patiala Vice Chancellor has resigned. Primarily, if you see the reason, he's not able to pay his teachers. So imagine a most prosperous state, the university is under tremendous financial crisis. This crisis was going on for last 30 years. Many of the state universities, in fact, Lalu Yadav, when he was a chief minister, had to demote around 2,000 professors from professorship to lecturership because the promotion was given at the state dispersal, whereas state did not have fund, and UGC would not give fund. The UGC in a defunct mode will not be able to kind of override the center and give fund to state universities. And state will have less and less of fund at its own disposal, at its own discretion, to create, maintain, and lead to a higher state at its universities and colleges. And therefore, this problem is going to come, and the policy document has neither indication nor solution. Rather, it complicates by saying it will start new institutions. Now, who will start these new institutions? Large number of these new institutions. It is not clear. On the other hand, on the research level, it says it will create a national research fund. By the way, the modalities of the research fund is also so centralizing that the Prime Minister heads that fund. And in fact, once the fund is created by Parliament, Prime Minister or the central executive is not responsible to the Parliament. Now imagine a university in Gorakhpur, the vice chancellor or a professor approaching PMO for research fund for a paper or for a research. This I think I can't even visualize that situation. So in that sense, we do not have a kind of institutional mechanism which talks about solution to a large problem. No, large problem in the sense of a policy for implementation problem. Who will start this institution? Who will fund this institution? And how do we maintain a global standard by this institution? In some sense, this also begin to reflect a very peculiar Indian tendency over the last 50 years or so, that only the center, only the capital Delhi, or only in a centralized manner, have large structure, can create large and global standard that the states cannot do, which Indian history suggests, and I'm glad Professor Balbir Arora is here, as Indian history suggests, that it is the global standards were maintained by the institutions at the regional level, at the state level. Some of the finest universities before the UGC created the central universities, where the state universities, Osmania, Rajasthan, Calcutta, you said Madras, and many Bombay, these were the flagship universities. When Punjab came, Punjab, because of its peculiar way of emerging with the state and center and the private fund going to was used to create that university by the British, but also Punjab University. So in that sense, the international or global standards were created by the states themselves. So what is it that that only the center can create global standards, or universities or institutions of global standards? That had emerged when the IIT system had emerged, or that had emerged when AIMS had emerged. But if you have to have a large number of such institutions, I think the confidence should have been given to the states. And at this juncture, the policy document does not indicate any such agency given to the local agencies. And I think, therefore, at the level of implementation, this policy document should be read in tandem with the nature of polity that is emerging. Thank you. I'll stop here because I thought I should have a central problem being discussed rather than all other problems. Thank you. Rashmi? Rashmi?
I think for some reason Rashmi is having some technical challenges today. I would just step in so that the flow continues. Can I request Professor Kuldeep Kaur to, uh, I think, on a similar pattern as Rashmi mentioned, say for about 10 minutes, share her thoughts, and then we will go to Dr. Professor Mandeep Kochar, and then we will go to, then we'll take it further. Professor Kuldeep.
Okay, good evening, everybody, the panelist. At the onset, am I audible, please?
Yes, yes.
At the onset, let me first of all thank EGROW Foundation, particularly Professor Charan Singh, for giving me this opportunity to share my views about the most expected outcome from any policy, from any plan, that is about the inclusiveness as well as equitability of this policy. So I will be sharing my views or even some hunches about how inclusive and equitable the new economic education policy will be. Since we started with our planning era, the basic objective of each and every 5-year plan have been to grow with social justice. And of late, this concept was replaced by the newly coined concept of inclusive growth. And one way or the other, the meaning of this concept of inclusiveness is that we should take all the deprived people, all the marginalized people, women, children, disabled, along the path of development, path of growth. So is what is expected from any education policy, that all the deprived persons, all the deprived communities, all the deprived societies, all the deprived students or marginalized people should be taken along so as to get the proper education, so as to be given the proper education. Now, earlier, if we talk about the education or the inclusiveness in the education policies,
Professor Kuldeep, we can't hear you.
Hello, so on and so on. Previously in other policies as well, this inclusive education was limited to special education or inclusion of children with disabilities. If we talk about the clear-cut definition of the inclusiveness, I can say that we still lack working definition of this inclusiveness. Actually, to me, this inclusiveness means presence, participation, and achievement of all the students, including the students with vulnerable identities, which may be in the form of social vulnerable identities, cultural identities, as well as the economic identities. And it is not the case that the present policy or the architects of the present education policy are not aware of these two aspects, that is inclusiveness as well as equitable policy. They have well designed the policy in the form with when it starts, where it starts with, if I say in quotes, this policy starts with that education is fundamental for achieving full human potential, developing an equitable and just society. I'm quoting the policy lines itself. Entry into quality higher education can open a vast area of possibilities that can lift both individuals as well as communities out of cycle of disadvantage. For this reason, making quality higher education opportunities available to all individuals must be among the highest priorities. So it's very well written in the start of this chapter on the inclusiveness as inclusive education policy, that how the architects or the policy framers are well aware of these two expectations from this education policy. And if I talk about what steps have been mentioned in this policy or the policy claims the following steps to be taken by government, to mention a few which can be, that is, the policy has tried to earmark suitable government funds for the education of SEDGs, which it called as socially, economically deprived groups, and transgender children by introducing the gender inclusive fund, especially. Secondly, it has tried to set clear targets for higher gross enrollment ratio for these SEDGs. Thirdly, it has tried to enhance, it has mentioned to enhance the gender balance in the admissions to higher education institutions. Next, it has tried to claim to establish special education zones containing large number of SEDGs. Then, to develop and support high quality HEIs so that teach in local and Indian languages. And also, it has tried to provide more financial assistance and scholarships to SEDGs in both public and private institutions of higher education. Then it finally it has also mentioned that we will be conducting outreach programs on higher education opportunities among SEDGs. Now, given these different claims in the policy, I have some doubts regarding these claims if this policy is implemented. For example, if the policy claims that it will be establishing or giving the provisions to all these SEDGs, but it has not mentioned how to measure and how to earmark these SEDGs, these groups, because there is always a possibility of subjectivity while considering and recognizing the SEDGs, because there is no explicit recognition to it. As far as the economically deprived groups are concerned, that's okay. But how can we measure the socially deprived groups? How can we say that these groups are socially deprived, or deprivation criteria may be different in the society for the different communities, for the different groups itself? Economically, it is okay that if the person is below the poverty line or it's above the poverty line, we can find out, or we can categorize the people in the different categories. But deprivation in terms of social characteristics or the social conditions is very, very difficult. So when the benefits are to be passed on to these SEDGs or these types of groups, then I am having this hunch that there will be possibility of subjectivity while recognizing these SEDGs, because earlier when the reservations were there or when the benefits were to be passed on, it was based upon caste or some other objective criteria regarding this. I am not in favor of this, that the reservation should be on the basis of caste, but I am in favor of this. I would suggest that at least when we are to recognize these socially deprived groups or economically deprived groups, then at least some objective criteria should have been means devised while formulating this policy, or while formulating or giving this type of claim that we will be introducing the equality or inclusiveness through giving different benefits or percolating the benefits to these SEDGs. And secondly, when inclusion and equity are to be included over there, it is not just the identification of the people on the basis of their deprivation. It's the task of each and every policy is to provide with the level playing to all the communities, to the deprived as well as the so elite people or the elite classes, by creating the learning environment and skills, etc. These aspects have not been mentioned in this policy anywhere. Also, there is one aspect that when we say, or this policy claims, that in order to increase the inclusiveness, we will be introducing the instructions in the mother tongue. This claim can also have two different I mean negative effects. That is, it can have two different different implications. Number one, it can have class based inequality to widen, as elite class can afford to go to the posh English medium schools, as well as these such deprived groups or these SEDGs or the people from those areas may not afford to go to the English medium schools, and hence there will be a clear class conflict between these SEDGs as well as the elite class, because those people will be getting the training or those people will be getting that education in their mother tongue only, and hence their sphere of competition will be limited one, whereas the other people or the students from the urban areas, from the elite class, will be getting the instructions in the English medium. Obviously their mental horizon will widen and they will be in a position to get more and more and enter into a better competition. And second implication of this will be that it has gendered implication. From the social angle, if we see that what in society we mean, particularly in Punjabi society, if we say in the rural areas, in the traditional families, the families are of the opinion that they can spend more and more on the education of a male child by sending him to the expensive English medium school, to the boarding schools. But as far as the girl child is concerned, they are conservative about it. They think that they are not going to provide the costly education to the girl child, and also they are not of the opinion that they should live away from the house, should be given the boarding facilities, they should move away from the families, their mobility is less, they should study or they should get their education where and when it is possible for them, where and when it is convenient for them to get the education. So there will be a gender bias as well, along with the class bias, if the inclusiveness is to be brought through the medium of instruction in the mother tongue itself. And another hunch from this policy regarding this is that the criticism of this policy is that it would lead to privatization of the higher education. Again, when the private players will enter and wherever they have entered, because they have entered in the education sphere as well, wherever they have entered, and we all know, being the educationist, we all know this, that there is always a denial of social justice in the private institutions, because private institutions have some other objective to enter into this sphere. According to them, the education is a business. It's not a mission education to be provided to the people. So if the new economic policy comes to phase out with the system of affiliation of the colleges to the universities, it is proposed that within coming 25 years, the affiliation of the colleges from the state universities will be phased away, and the colleges will be converted into autonomous colleges, which will be governed by the board of governors, constituted by the sweet will of the owners or the management of those autonomous colleges. Now, obviously, if the board of governors are there, then again subjectivity will also be there. They will not be considering at all as far as the social welfare aspect is concerned, as far as the inclusiveness is concerned. And also, if I mention that in this policy regarding the private universities, there is no mention of regulations, minimum qualifications, policies, service conditions, courses, and teacher people ratio. So it will mean that if there are no regulators, there are no regulations, there are no minimum standards, there are no minimum qualifications, there are no minimum standing instructions to the private players, in that case, how can we expect the equity and inclusiveness from these private players or from these private institutions? Also, it is since already I have mentioned you that these universities have a high fee structure. These universities have high funding means scope, annual funds and all that. How can all those marginalized people afford to go to these universities and can get the education over there, and that education which has no regulation, where no quality checks are there? I can give the example of one of the important university in Punjab, the one of the premier, so-called premier university in Punjab. They will be bringing the courses which are not even meant for, or which are not suitable for the students or for the young generation in Punjab itself, so that after getting the degree in that particular area, there is no possibility of getting absorbed to get the employment in the employment market itself. So because their objectives are different when they enter into this arena, when they enter into this education sphere, their objectives are totally different. They are more the material one rather than you can say being the equitable one, or rather than being the social aspect from considering the social aspect from that. Under such conditions,
Could you try to wind up? Thank you.
Sure, I will. Also, if I mention of the commitment to the universities of the government funding, then the government is supposed to withdraw from the funding, and UGC is going to be abolished. And also, if the foreign universities are supposed to enter, in that case, government is also shying away to get responsibility to give the quality education. All these aspects show that the government and the state governments are in conflict to share the responsibility of giving the quality education or the inclusive education thereby. And similarly, if we say that the target in this policy is universalization of education by 2030, is it the right to education? Is it not the right to education model? Because if the education is a fundamental right, then there is no need to set a limit. There is no need to set a deadline that by this time we will be giving the universalization of the education. And also, in other aspect, we will say that if the government is not going to provide these types of opportunities of inclusiveness or the equality of education, then we cannot expect it from the private players. We cannot expect it from the state governments, or sorry, we cannot expect it from the other stakeholders as well. So these are my points, that if these ornamental claims have been made in this policy, then definitely some suggestions, some solid solid conclusions or some solid basis should also have been given regarding this, that how accountability and evaluation systems will be there in order to incorporate these two important aspects in the education system itself. With this, I'm sorry, I have taken few more minutes regarding this. With this, I will end up, and we will be discussing about these elements afterwards. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Kaur. You actually tried to brought the all aspects of the inclusion. However, there are a lot of contestation from many, because this topic is which is wide, and the policy actually tried to get into the micro management of the inclusiveness, but by the same time it has lost the macro picture to some point. That's what Professor Kaur actually tried to forward, and I think we have a lot of questions and discussions on these aspects of the national education policy. We will move into the next speaker, Professor Mandeep Kochar, who is teaching in the Bombay HNSC University, Mumbai. She has a wide experience in teacher education, and she will be throwing some lights on teacher education in the national education policy. Teacher education is actually the core of the quality education that we are offering, because without having good teacher training, we can't expect good education, quality education. Professor Mandeep Kochar. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Reshmi. Dr. Reshmi, I'm here. I hope you can hear me. And I will be sharing my screen, so I was trying out for that. I hope it is clear.
Yes.
You are audible, and your screen is also clear.
Yes, screen is clear. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yes.
This is what I just wanted to share with you, listening to the previous speakers, because they had been talking about the higher education. And I will be taking you all right from the beginning, how the change had been in the just a moment. Yeah, in the policy right from the beginning in early childhood education, as you have rightly mentioned, that teacher education, because basically if the system needs to change, the teacher education as well as early childhood education has to be structured. Basically, everything in school education has, in the past also it had been dependent on teacher and in the system, and same thing over here also in this policy. When we see, just a moment, this I need to work on to the screen needs to, yes, sorry. Yeah, thank you. This is what I quickly will run through, because the previous speakers have mentioned about the policy specifically. The change has taken place in 2020, which was almost all of sudden. And if I say it was actually not all of sudden, the policy was put up on the public portal for at least 1 year. If the educationists had to contribute into it, there was long time which was given to the public. But only thing is, public had taken that much interest only, which again, government educationists, they have very specifically, they have mentioned how much feedback they have got into. Now, actually, if we look into the whole scenario, we needed a change. We needed a change in the education, we needed a change in the teacher education, and we needed the change in the availability and quality of education. We all know what had been happening to our degrees in the past. So the previous policy had been actually, if you look into over here, the previous policy focused on accessibility and fairness. That means reaching to the masses. But still, we could not. If we statistically calculate the literacy rate of India, we have not achieved enough what could have been achieved in the past. So looking into that, if we see the positive side of the policy, it claims to be focusing on quality education, school education, as well as higher education. So I will quickly, make the contrast between the two, what had been the previous structure and what is the current structure of school education I will be focusing on. We all know we have passed out from 10+2, and that system changed actually in 85. When, if you all remember, there was 1 year prep and then we all would go to graduation. So 10 plus 1 plus 4 was the previous system in 86, before 85, 86. And that is how after 34, we are going to change 34 years. We are going to change the system now, which is 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4. Now, this 5-year system had never been into the policy of, which we say early childhood never came into school education system. This is the major change which is going to happen, and that major change will make lot of change in training the teachers also, because earlier we only had been having Anganwadi, Balwadi teachers, which were only the rural education setup, and in urban setup, completely early childhood education was a privatized group. But now, if it will be the part of government schools, the hope is children parents will not have to pay that high fee which they had been paying in early childhood education to, let's say, kangaroo kids and Zimbaru and all that, because early childhood education was absolutely a business industry in the past. So this is the major change which is going to take place in that the students would spend that much of amount of money in their graduation and post graduation what parents had to spend for their education in pre-primary education. This will bring a major change in the policy. Now, a second very important thing which I can say is the internship in the schools. That is going to be the major focus. Now, let us quickly understand the structure which had been put up in the policy. That earlier we had been having, the previous academic structure was like this. We had 10 years education, child would go to the school at the age of 5.5 or maybe 6 also, and then +2, this was the previous structure. Now, when we have 3 years of early childhood also added into the school education, child will pass out at, so now consider this, ages 6 to 8. Now, these 6 to 8 will be foundational education that will be considered. And then after that, when we look into the whole structure that is built up, I'm starting from 4, 3, 3, then 5, then preparatory as well as middle and secondary. Now, if you look into this, here is where vocationalization of education has been introduced, which if you see, probably we can call it will turn out something like where we had been fighting for child labor, or we had been considering such kind of that the small children should not be. But over a period of time, if you look into, private schools actually had been doing some kind of vocational training, but the interiors of India, if you look into the government education, interiors of India was always unable to give chances for the internship as well as hands-on experience, or ultimately the kind of vocational education children were required and we were unable to give them, probably the possibility will be that will happen in this education policy. This I will not talk much. The previous speakers have already spoken about how the higher education will be. I will just mention that credit system, which will be the major thing. MPhil already had been discussed. Dr. Rakesh, he said it, that there will be no MPhil education. It will be direct to PhD. The graduation, which you all know, 3 to 4 years graduation will be there, and 1 year master's degree can be then one can pursue to the highest qualification. This is what I very specifically I feel happy about, is academic bank credit, which never ever was there in the you can say field of education in India. In higher education, students will be able to retain their credits. Now, this is where exit and multiple entry system will be introduced in higher education. Now, if you look into the whole system, probably after the school education, we will be having children who are better vocationally trained. They will be better drivers. They may be better tailors. They may be better carpenters. They will be probably, different IT people, better clerks, because they have hands-on experience. They have taken internship in the school, and when they will implement into their, if they drop out from the school education itself, they will have better skill-based experience that will add into their profession. That will be one advantage of this education policy. Second bigger advantage will be saving your credit, saving your bank for the credits. If you drop out from your graduation for 1 year, you can come back after 2 years or 3 years. That is the major change which is going to happen in this policy, which will be helpful. As an educationist, I see that side of its implication. Now, what is going to happen in teacher education and recruitment? We need to understand, if the school system is going to change, definitely teacher education or teacher training also is going to change. Now, teacher training, what was happening now in the whole process was, there was 2 years B.Ed, which definitely is going to remain for longer number of years, at least 4 to 5 years. 2 years B.Ed will have to be retained, because by the time BA education for 4 years will come out, and these students who have already entered into BA, BSc, BCom, or even you can say we are having students who come from 4-year graduation also, they have already entered into graduation. So when they will come and they will realize and they want to become teachers, they are to be absorbed for another 3 to 4 years. So 2 years B.Ed will have to be retained for coming at least 4 to 5 years, probably 2025. But government says that after 22, after 24, 2 years B.Ed will have to be vanished. We actually do not know how all that in the process will take place, because government itself, for 2 years, government is going to take the reviews. 1 year of grace, which government has said it. State governments are sending their reviews. We do not know when the policy is going to get implemented actually in practice in its situation. So if we look into the grace period also, we cannot actually say when the 2-year B.Ed will be stopped. So 4-year B.Ed will be a parallel system which will be run. Now, at this point of time, CTET was not that compulsory, but now in the coming years, it is going to be mandatory. As Dr. Rakesh has mentioned in the beginning, that NTA, National Testing Associations authorities, will become, the testing from them will become mandatory. So after doing the graduation, after doing the B.Ed, teachers will have to go through some kind of testing which will make them eligible. Now, as for lectureship, we have UGC, we have NET, we have SET. We have TET, Teachers Eligibility Test, but that test will become compulsory, which is going to be the major change in teacher education. So there are some key factors which I specifically, I think many of them they are mentioned by the previous speakers. So I was quickly trying to highlight while listening to them. The focus on the language will be there. Higher Education Commission will be there, which we do not know actually the existence of Higher Education Commission or its contribution, but majorly medical and legal education still is separated from that. This is what because this policy actually says that this commission will be for IT, for humanities, or for management, but it excludes medical and legal education. So for them, different setup will be there as far the understanding of the policy which goes about. The cluster of schools is another thing which is mentioned in the policy, and self peer and teacher assessment. The three-dimensional, which we say the three-dimensional assessment, we had been talking about it, peer reviews, teacher reviews, how successful that can be or how much it will be contributing in the field of assessment for either teachers or students, even for the whole system. So the time will be defining certain statements and components which had been mentioned in the policy. The period which is given, which is very long period, so we do not know 10 years or because it says that by 2040, again that is also very long period, that whole policy has to be implemented. I agree that the previous speakers have said it about regional languages, and basically the promotion of Indian languages had been mentioned in the school education. It can create lot of diversity between the communities, but I see that promotion of Indian languages or promotion of regional language, that's a right of you can say the kind of right of the parent, right of the child to teach, right of the learner to learn mother tongue. So if that promotion takes place, that is going to happen very good for the upcoming generation, and the languages will not die their own, you can say, kind of at their own death. So there is no hard separation between these streams which we had been talking about. These are some of the short forms I will skip over. And the last thing which I got an indication that I need to wind up. The last thing I wish to say is that it's not going to be an overnight change. It's not, because actually the policy had been in process. Actually, policy had been asking for the suggestions. Probably we have to work now on its implication, because still government is giving lots of time for its implication. So we, the educationists, we have to contribute for its successful implication. We need to embrace it so that our youth, our kids, and the teachers and teaching system can be benefiting maximum out of it. Thank you for giving me this time. Let's see the positive side of the policy and how we can be contributing for the successful implication of the policy. Thank you. I will stop sharing my screen, and Reshmi, it's over to you now.
Thank you, Mandeep. You actually very clearly explained the transition from the previous one, this national education policy to 2040 with regard to teacher education. In fact, if we look into the kind of number of teachers we required when ECC is also part of education, and if you follow the right to education teacher-student ratio, if you follow the number of the employment, the teachers we need, it's a huge number we need, and also the teacher education institute in the country needs to train a huge number of people. So then another interesting point which you raised, because this is what I mean, I was also discussing with some people that when we are restricting to the BA, BEd or BSc, BEd program, and we are slowly widening up the 2-year BA program. we are actually stopping or banning those who interested to come after some years of interacting with some other sectors and want to be a teacher. When we realize that is something they want to do, we don't have any kind of venue for them to include and incorporate in the system. So thank you, Manpreet, for certain critical issues that the policy is posing, and also the possibilities that we can actually try to work around. Thank you. And finally, now Vidyalakshmi Balakrishnan to share her thoughts on the school education. So then we can actually slowly get into the last session of the this webinar. Vidyalakshmi Balakrishnan, and Vidyalakshmi is author of one book, which is Growing Up and Growing Away, which has been a very interesting. She actually looked into the children from the cartoons of yeah, she also sees a policy in a different angle. I look forward. Vidyalakshmi, please.
Yes. Thank you so much, Dr. Bhaskaran, and thank you very much for having me and for all the previous speakers. All of you have made this a very interesting Friday evening. I'm not used to having so much stimulation and intellectual stimulation of this kind on a Friday evening during this crazy time we're living in.
Vijay Lakshmi ji, would you mind
Ji?
opening your camera?
I'm sorry, I live in a village, so my data thing is like, I'm really sorry about this. That's what I had explained to Dr. Bhaskaran before, that I'm having a problem because of that. So it's like I'm having to sit right next to the thing, because you never know when the gods who run the electricity department in Tamil Nadu will decide that, okay, Gaya, that's basically how it works. Yeah, thank you. Basically, I just wanted to just share that earlier this year, I had done a short article which looked at, and what I had looked at as 5 futures which this new education policy hints at. And I would just like to quickly and in very telescopic manner just share that with you. And I would request Dr. Bhaskaran, in case anyone's interested, they could probably get a link of that. The show notes could probably share those. Primarily, what I do see happening over here is that there will be a very different way in which we would look at financing. An earlier speaker had spoken about the whole role of philanthropy, which this particular policy mandarins have examined and have looked and are promoting. The other one which we would look at, but what we would probably look at really is that much more than philanthropy, what I do see is that the family and the state, there will be a move towards some form of blended financing, which is at this point, so this whole idea that we have, which is encoded in our constitution, of the state being the provider and the state taking on the responsibility of imparting education to tomorrow's citizens, that will now retreat and become much more of a joint enterprise between the family and the state. And that is something for which we really do not have any research. We don't have anyone who even has any idea. We're really moving into uncharted territory. Another thing which I would endorse, and which my paper earlier this year had also endorsed, was something which I think more than one speaker has raised, which is the whole issue of child labor. One of the things which research across the last 10 years has been showing has been that children, especially above the age of 9 or 10, when they're moving into upper primary education, are clearly doing schoolwork plus work, which is paid work or supplementing it at home, not just as chores, but actually in terms of supplementing the family income. That I do see as shifting. What we are probably going to see from the next academic year, and which would be probably that children will work and also go to school. So there will be this fundamental shift in the way we look at the school-work relationship in children's lives. A lot of that is not necessarily the fault of the mandarins, but much more in terms of just the times that we are living in and what we had clearly not planned for, which is a pandemic. The third thing which I would like to see, would I do see happening right now, which would be that, a lot of the confrontation between the nonprofit workspace and those who speak for has been in the whole area of what are the roles of the public and the private sector. Now, I do see, and there's been a huge effort made. And if we look at the census numbers, if I might just digress for just a second, Dr. Bhaskaran, if you look at the census numbers between the 1980s and the turn of the century, we saw a revolution happen, which was reflected in the education numbers. We went from a country which had 40% girls' education to a place where we have 90% plus. One other thing which does not happen, which is not even mentioned, I think this must be the first education discussion I've ever been in where people didn't even feel the need to talk about the whole area of gender parity, because it's now become a reality. We all see it around us, we experience it every day. And yet, in my lifetime, and I think in many others who are part of this discussion, we know that that was not the reality when we were growing up. And that it could actually change in one lifetime was not something many people had actually expected. So this was something which is very different. What will, however, happen is that this whole boundary between public and private will soften. One other thing which has been happening, and a lot of people who work on school education, huge uptick in demand for registration in schools, in government schools. Families are making pragmatic decisions. They're pulling children out of private schools, or the so-called private schools, which are basically shops, which are being run over through much of urban and peri-urban India, and moving them back into government schools. And this is not necessarily a voting of and an acknowledgement of the value that a government school is providing, but much more pragmatic decision saying we just can't pay these fees anymore. I mean, this is just not possible. And instead of that, what they're doing is also in chota mohallas, in among families, they're sharing one ID or something for any of these multiple sets of these online schools which have begun, which are really for-profit ventures, which are attempting to teach children very often from classes 5 upwards. So this is becoming a very pragmatic decision, and it's not yet, this is really very much anecdotal evidence. A lot of us who've been working on education for decades often talk about these things, because this is something which we had not anticipated happening, that families would make these kinds of decisions. So this would be the 3 or 4 areas that I do see happening very much over the next few years. And the big difference, which I think, and I actually have a lot of appreciation for the teams which have worked on this particular education policy, is the fact that they were able to, despite the environment in which they were working, able to demonstrate the need for a continuity, and especially a continuity in the national curriculum framework. I think there isn't enough, we actually have never acknowledged the sheer human contribution of the people who were a part of that national curriculum framework putting together. And the fact that in this environment that we're all living through in the last few years in India, the group was able to maintain not just the spirit of it, but actually the complete language. Every Indian child will grow up to be a global citizen, and that is the larger ethos, not just of the education policy, but also the Constitution of India. That's a wonderful thing to have. Thank you.
Thank you,
Over to you.
Vijayalakshmi. Thank you, Vijayalakshmi, bringing together various things in a very crisp manner. Yes, there are a lot of opportunities and there are a lot of changes we are perceiving, especially from when we had to handle it with something which we never thought about, the pandemic and online, and how the families are getting involved, and also there are a lot of children are on the verge of dropping out. So I think we are in a completely different paradigm right now to deal with a different set of issues. And the thing is that which you talked about is child labor, which I think is going to be another challenge. And yes, we can pursue as you and even Mandeep has mentioned, the experience or apprenticeship would be, helping children to get into the workforce as a skilled labor. But what I had seen from my experience as a researcher, that once a child is getting into workstation, eventually drops out from the education completely, and like move into the labor market as a semi-skilled and semi-literate person. Hey, keeping it aside, let's look for someone have some views and to discuss about it, because the first speakers has brought different perspective. I would say the different perspective to the education, this national education policy. So when we have something to add on, or maybe some clarification is there. That- Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, anyone has any point to add on, not only to Vijayalakshmi, to others? Also?
This is Professor N.N. Sharma. Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay.
Yes, you are audible.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Listen to the perspectives as the panelists have presented. I would just like to add 2 points only. One is about the first speaker, Professor Chris, was talking about the this education being in the concurrent list. So, national education policy, it have to be the macro level national perspective. But
Excuse me, Professor. There is some your bandwidth issues there. Can you try once again? Otherwise, can you text it in the chat box? Because you are okay.
Okay.
Because you are not clearly breaking very badly.
Okay.
Okay. Now I think you are clear. You please continue.
Okay, it's all right. So yeah. So the most of lie in the state. Now in the states, we are having the state universities. The state universities are operating under tremendous financial constraints. And national education policy, ultimately, though we are talking about in this national, it has to be a local approach, because internationalization of education is also there. And we have to take the local issues also. So the state universities would be facing tremendous financial problems, and most of them are not being able to get them registered under LP, and therefore they would not be able to avail the central funds. So that is a big concern for the state universities. Number 2, in the national education policy, nothing has been specifically mentioned about universities. So the role of education is glorified, but
It is not clear. It's not
yeah.
audible. You are breaking badly. Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
It was not clearly audible. Rakesh, I think he was talking about the fund constraints at the state universities. Am I right, Professor Sharma?
Yes, very much.
Okay. So what was the question, or like making a comment or a question?
It is like a comment only.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I knew definitely. Rakesh, you want to add something?
This is exactly what I was mentioning. The larger policy. If you had heard me properly in the first larger, the way I was trying to see the symmetry between the political economy of the country and the nation as such, and the kind of policy implementation that is left to be done. In that sense, it's absolutely clear that we have no clue as to how will such a huge institutional framework will emerge without the help of the states on the one hand, and on the other, the states have no resources left. In fact, particularly after the Indian nation has become a national economy after GST. And in that sense, without a planning commission, without a finance commissions, a very active role and all these things, as Dr. Singh will know better, where will we go to facilitate institution building? Unless the states and state universities, as you rightly pointed out, are more or less in many states, they are almost like in a deadpan. So expecting them to have world-class education, research, peer reviews, and all these things is, I think, daydreaming in many sense. Because even a good research paper in science requires 3 to 5 lakhs rupees to get published in a moderately good academic journal. Where will that 6 and 7 lakhs will come? Because just for one paper, we are thinking of thousands of papers. So in that sense, we are we are left in a lurch in the whole discussion. Thank you.
Madam Rashmi.
Thank you.
Madam Rashmi, I am Subramanian. Hello.
Please continue.
Yeah. Can I make a small?
Yeah, please.
Thank you. Oh, I held 2 seminars here in Chennai on this national education policy some 8 months ago, and then participated also in certain other seminars. But then what I personally feel is, I have been an ex-RBI man, and then of course leaving all those aside, I am an administrator. I feel from 1986 to, as you rightly said, 2019, 34 years, nothing has been, major reforms have been brought in education. We need it when we have moved far long away in the globalization and all that. We need it. So something has come now, black and white, but it looks very not able to comprehensively understood, very easily implementable. But still, we have to start. It's better to implement and see the weaknesses and then go on plugging those weaknesses at the emerging situations. It is better as an administrator, we look at the implementation part. Unfortunately for us, the pandemic came in between, and then the whole thing got stopped. And I feel from the next academic year, the new education policy will take its own shape. Same regulatory and then audit and other structure will be concretized, and then the course contents and other things will come. The realization of this aspiration will definitely move forward, take us forward. That is my conclusion. Implementation is the key for success of any new reforms. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Implementation is a key, and for implementation, we need to have sufficient fund. And the fund is from now, as Professor Rakesh Patapayal mentioned, and everything has to come from the center. State doesn't have any venue to raise finance for education. For the either school or even for their colleges. So this is going to be, I guess, major challenge, because in the past also, when we are looking into why the first 2 policies didn't achieve the desired goal, is mainly because of lack of funds. So in the present scenario also, the policy document says that eventually by 2030 we have to raise the education spending up to 20% of the total budget spending. So, but how we will raise that to not that level? We don't have any plan, and we don't have any kind of projection, which is completely missing in the the policy. So we are actually having a big dreams and big goals, but one another side, we still with regard to the implementation, not discussed or not thrown any idea how we have to approach it, because we have experiences from the past which has not been taken it forward. Anyway, let's see how things are going to change. In fact, pandemic is actually throwing a lot of opportunity that if we invest in education, that will be investment for the future, and we could achieve more. So then this budget, let's hope that finance minister will find some serious attention to the education sector. Yeah, anyone else would have? Yes, sir, you are muted. Yes.
Me, there's a question to you and your panelists. Now, there are fiscal constraints, both at the center and the state and even the local bodies. And my thought was this online teaching and online mechanism of education. Do you think that this will reduce the fiscal or the financial requirements of the universities? Will this help?
Online education, I don't think it's going to be like a sustainable one in a long term and various accounts first. Second thing is that if you want to have education, we need to have infrastructure for that. And today itself, when I do consider that I do have a better infrastructure, equipped with better infrastructure, that I do have good quality devices and technical data service also, but they conked on the time, and then I was not able to get into the system properly, and my video was not shown. I was the link broadband was an issue. So this is actually the issue across the country, and India's digital investment infrastructure is not great if one of the poor. So without investing in that area, if promoting online education, whether it is a school or in a higher education, is going to be a disaster, because inclusion, instead of inclusion, exclusion would be higher. A lot of students are going to be out from the system completely, and the teachers are like clueless about whom they are teaching and what they are doing after a point of time. So it's the interaction that makes education institutions vibrant, and education itself is like more productive. I think that part of it, we cannot pursue this online education in any level as a alternative. Maybe we can have during a pandemic like this, but after that we need to have the personal system. Even you are aware that the EGROW is conducting distance education, but weekly they do have courses, classes. The students go and meet the teachers. It's a regular classes taking place. So that's a way even distance education system is also functioning in the country. I hope maybe Mandeep or other people can contribute into this, because you are the people with the students and with the system, so you understand this transition actually very well.
Yes, Dr. Rashmi, thank you for your response. And Dr. Charan Singh, to your answer, I differ completely from Rashmi for this point. I consider online education can do really, it can play a very great role in the future, not only in teacher education or school education. At least we need to have blended education. We need to have those many resources. We need to upgrade our infrastructure, because what online education has done in pandemic, online education has saved paper. Universities and schools consume maximum of paper during examination. If we come up with online examination, or if we come up with a very set standard. Now, for example, if UGC can be, which is a major, you can say a test, NEET can be possible, or IELTS can be possible, online examination can be possible. Why not in higher education online examination can be possible, where we can save lots and lots of paper for the university. We can save lots and lots of traveling allowances and traveling conveyance. For the inconvenience for the people also can be saved. So at least 20-25%. Now universities have come. I hope you all are aware about it. Earlier we had 60-40 ratio. Now we are coming, earlier we had 75-25 ratio of physical education as well as online education. Now we are going to come up with 60-40 ratio at not only at higher education but even at school education. 40% of education has been made mandatory, it has been made compulsory, and it is a part of self-learning also. So students will have to do Swayam courses, Coursera courses, TEDx courses, and those certified courses will have to be blended into their higher education or UG and PG courses. So already the system is in function. This has to be implemented, and I think 2020 education will be the upcoming graduation, post graduations will be implementing either 75-25 or 60-40 ratio of online education.
See, if I have
Over
one
to the
question here.
next. Yeah, sorry. Yes.
When the universities and UGC is actually promoting the Coursera and other online course platforms and for the different courses, and who actually evaluates the quality of such courses? Because there is no regulation, there is no quality check, nothing. People will be coming, then they said, okay, these things has been done, and they also say that 4 credits or 2 credits or 1 credit the university is taking it. But on what basis? If you are promoting it, that's actually different kind of issues are posing in the system. So how it can be after and beyond a point can promote it, such courses?
So Rashmi, when these courses are implemented by Government of India, when they are come on the public portal for the people to be selected, selecting the courses, they are selected on the basis of academic proof. So there is a systematic body which approves those courses, and so that the validity and reliability of the courses are already checked. Then only they come on the public portal and chosen by the people. So this is what one point I wanted to make, because universities cannot be just allowing any courses by anybody. Universities are recommended or suggested only to be allowing certain registered bodies which are responsible for online courses.
Okay, so this kind of discussion is already on, or because
it is already,
I'm asking.
Swayam is a Government of India portal, SWAYAM. And Coursera, TEDx, these are the standardized portals where students can get enrolled into. They can take up some courses from there, and when they come back, those credits are added into their regular degree.
Okay, then
This
I
is
have
in
one more
practice.
question. Yeah, I have
Sorry,
one more
this is.
question. Yes,
Please tell
continue.
me. This is in practice for last 1 to 2 years. That's what I just wanted to say. Thank you. You can ask the question.
Yeah, no. See, the thing is that recently you might know that the LSR student committed, and then that time a lot of newspaper article came up that in Delhi University, around 30% of students only have the sufficient infrastructure to attend class, and majority are missing the classes and either on the verge of dropping out from the course completely. So this is actually the reality. So with that reality, and how we are going to address this thing, and do you have some idea about it?
I think, sorry. Yeah, Dr. Charan Singh can answer.
Rashmi,
time is getting over.
No problem. Rashmi, the worldwide, the phenomena is that brick and mortar classes and brick and mortar branches of banks and institutions, they are shrinking because online and digital stamp is increasing. So my own reading was looking at the cost constraint, which has been flagged, an issue which has been flagged by Professor Sarma as well as Professor Patbial. My own reading has been that the scope for cost cutting would increase with the digital stamp in terms of education. So that is why I asked that question. Now, you are right. There could be some students who would probably not be able to afford the digital infrastructure. But I think something very beautiful has been experimented at IIM. So what they did is they said the students who are either in remote villages and therefore cannot assess the advanced digital staff, they are welcome to come to the university and stay in the hostel, whereas others who have the privilege and can afford or live in locations which provide them a very strong digital infrastructure, they can continue to do online classes from wherever they are. So there's a midway compromise formula which has been very successfully tested. So my thought was that in case the universities are starved of resources, the online mechanism can be used to rationalize their cost. And there are ways one can figure out or ways one can find out to see that children who are in locations which do not have adequate digital infrastructure, they can they can be addressed separately from those children who do have that infrastructure. Now, I'm sure some of you will feel that this will increase divide between the haves and the have-nots. Yes, there is a possibility of that. I agree. But then I think there is a way to reduce cost and optimize the resources. That was the point that I was trying to make.
I will kindly submit one point, supplement the point to Dr. Charan Singh. The digital resources can be shared. Sharing of digital resources will bring down the cost because some locations may not have that facility. Some locations, some institutions will have excess capacity. So that will be shared. This one will be able to reduce the cost and then improve the digital transmission. This is number one. Number two, I am the founder chairman of the Management Teachers Consortium Global Advisory Board, and then I have had access to about more than 350 B schools and MBA departments of universities across 50 countries. And now I find even the monitoring and auditing of teachers and then faculties can be done through this digital infrastructure. My wife, she is an educational officer in a BVM International Global School, and then having a chain of schools in different locations in Tamil Nadu. She is able to do it during this pandemic right from the house. She is able to monitor the teachers that are taking classes and all that. Anytime she can enter into the digital room and provide the report and corrections, and that has made a lot of improvement in the efficiency of the teachers across the institution concerned. I feel we will be able to move forward. Dr. Charan Singh had rightly said, I am from Reserve Bank. Banking system we have been able to provide. So education system also will come up with that. Finally, one small point as regard the funds not being available. I don't think our government of India had not said the funds will be a constraint. Funds will not be a constraint because the budget itself has been more and more open-ended. It is not a strictly closed budget as those days we used to have in the late 90s and early millennium, but now open-ended budget. So budget government can anytime provide more funds, and funds should not be a constraint. Implementation is the key. That is, I would like to emphasize on that. Thank you very much.
Shall we, any more questions, or shall we wind up here? Professor? Hello. Wind up here? If that no, if we almost everyone.
Am I audible?
Go ahead.
Am I audible? Shall we wind up now?
Should we wind up? Okay.
Yeah, I think so. We should wind up now.
Professor Rashmi, I must thank you for anchoring this event today. And I must thank all the panelists that you brought in. Each one of them have contributed to our learning today. As you know, our webinars are recorded and they'll be put on our website tomorrow by noon. So if you want to share these webinars with your students and colleagues, please feel free to do so. I must thank each one of the panelists on a Friday evening who has agreed to come and contribute, and also the participants who have spent their valuable time. It's nearly 2 hours that we have been together and discussing this on a very important issue. Next Friday, we have another webinar, and that's on the microfinance institutions. And again, as the policy of EGROW is to get the best minds in the country to think and talk about issues. Similarly, for the webinar tomorrow, next Friday, we are going to have experts from the leading MFIs speak to us on the challenges that the MFIs have during COVID times. Same time, 5:30 onwards, we start our webinars. I'd request you to please join in, and I'm sure that webinar on MFIs will be as vibrant and as educative as today's webinar has been. Thank you once again, and look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you and good night.
Thank you so much to the organizers, and thank you for this wonderful input. And it is really nice and intellectual being with you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Rashmi. Thank you, Dr. Charanjit.